Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's training. I want to take just about an hour for this particular topic, so I'll try and move a little bit fast. The topic is on Huawei VRP, Versatile Routing Platform. So Versatile Routing Platform is the network operating system for Huawei network devices like switches, routers, firewalls, and so on and so forth. So any Huawei device will most likely run on Huawei VRP. So it's just an operating system that is used to manage this particular hardware. Okay. So the forward. So VRP stands for this, Versatile Routing Platform. So it is a universal operating system platform for Huawei data communication products. So it is based on IP and adapts a component-based architecture, provides rich features and functions such as or including application-based tailorable and extensible functions, greatly improving the running efficiency of the devices that use this OS. To efficiently manage devices, you must be familiar. So as a network engineer, you must be familiar with VRP and how to configure VRP because all the switches, routers, they run on Huawei VRP. So this particular topic will describe the basic concepts, common commands, and command line interface of the VRP. I like it because at the very end, we even have a case, a configuration case that we can be able to do together. Jackson, if you can hear me, please read out the objectives for us.
On completion of this course, you'll be able to understand the VRP basics, learn how to use CLI, master basic CLI commands.
Wonderful. So let's begin with the first subtopic, which is the overview of VRP. So really, VRP, as we've said, is a network operating system for managing Huawei datacom products. Now, really, VRP will run on Huawei security devices, routing devices, switching devices, and also wireless devices. These are some of the functions that really VRP will provide. So one of them is to provide you a user interface that you'll use to configure the device, and also what we call unified management interface. Just like then also it implements the functions of the control plane. So we have what we call the control plane. We're gonna discuss this a little bit further when we start looking at routing. And we also have what we call the forwarding plane. So at the moment, just know that it helps with the functions of both the control plane and the forwarding plane. Just in summary, control plane is used to learn, for example, routes and configurations of protocols, while forwarding plane is used to forward the data. And so it also implements the communication between the device forwarding plane and the control plane. So they have to talk to each other. So those are the functions of this particular network operating system called the Versatile Routing Platform. Now, over the years, VRP has evolved through various versions. The first one was called VRP1. The other one was called VRP2. Then we have 3. Then after 3, we went to 5. And after that, we went to VRP version 8. Of course, just like any software, an operating system will be improved in order to will evolve in order to be able to fix certain problems, security problems, for example, and to also be able to support new features, like when certain protocols are either changed or improved, and therefore the operating system also has to evolve. Sometimes an operating system might also be able to improve so that it can be able to accommodate the new hardware features that are required in the market. Now, what you need to know is that VRP 1 to 3 have already been discontinued, meaning that they no longer support them. Currently, we are only using VRP version 5 and VRP version 8. So those two are the ones that are currently being used. So remember, Sarah asked the other day, what are some of the things that you look at when you go to purchase a device? So you might need to look at the VRP version, for example, that particular device is running. So currently, the AR series routers and S series switches are running VRP version 5, while VRP version 8 is for mostly the data center series routers and switches. Now, any operating system must be able to support what you call a file system. Must be able to support what you call a file system. Now, generally, the purpose of the file system is to manage files, and number two, to manage directories. So a file is anything you create using the computer, anything you create using a computer. So you might have a video file, you might have a picture file, a text document is a file. All those, anything that you create using a computer is called a file. Now, sometimes we group, we store similar files in what we call a directory. Or for example, in Windows, we call it a folder. So the purpose of the file system is to manage those files and directories in your storage media, so that it can allow you to do a number of things. For example, to view, create, rename, or delete directories. You can also be able to copy, move, rename, and delete files. So we're going to see commands that will help us to do that. Now, there are some files that you must be aware of. 4 types of files have been highlighted here. The first one is the system software. Now, as we know, when we learn about types of software, we normally refer to 2 categories. The first one being system software, and the second one being application software. So the system software is really used to manage the hardware and to provide the platform where you can be able to now install the application software. Application software used to perform specific tasks. So those are the 2. So similarly, in Huawei devices, you'll have a system software, and that system software is what you're calling VRP, by the way. So the system software will be used for the device startup and operation, also provides support, management, and services for the particular device. Now, normally, with this system software, the extension of a system software file normally ends with the extension .cc. So we're going to look at that in a short while. The other type of file that you need to be aware of is what we call a patch file. patch files are mostly used to fix certain problems in the system software. So when we release a VRP version 8, for example, if we realize that there is a particular problem with a particular component of that particular operating system, then we have to make a patch file for it in order to fix that particular problem. So that is how a patch file is used. And it's used to fix bugs in the system software. Now, generally, these files end with the extension .pat. Then we have configuration files. As the name suggests, configuration files are used to store configuration commands. So whenever we configure certain bits of the device, like we configure a certain protocol, we configure a certain interface with an IP address, then the file that is being changed and store those particular configuration commands is what we call the configuration file. So it enables a device to start with the configuration files. Normally, this kind of files will either have a .cfg extension or .zip or .dat. Then the last type of file is what we call the path. The path file controls features, control product features and resources. They normally end with a .bin. They normally end with a .bin. So really, path files are specifically used for update and upgrade most of the time of the system software. So those are the 4 types of files that we're just looking at here. But your router will have other important files, such as, for example, the license files, which you might also need to upload in order for your device to work. So don't forget about the license file too. Now let's look at the storage media. If anyone has a question, please, you can just lift up your hand or unmute yourself and let me know. Now, just like our computers that have a hard drive and RAM, Huawei routers and switches also have storage media that is used to store those files that we've just looked at and to also run them. Now, to be precise, the permanent memory for these devices is what we call the flash drive. So flash drive is like the hard drive in our laptops and desktop computers. So the flash drive is non-volatile, meaning it will offer permanent storage even when you shut down the device. So that is the flash drive. Normally, it will store all the files, like the patch files, the path files, all of them are going to be saved in the flash drive. Now, we have 2 types of RAMs. One of them is non-volatile, this one NVRAM, meaning it offers permanent storage. And we also have the SDRAM. Now, SDRAM is synchronous dynamic random access memory. Synchronous dynamic random access memory. So this is the primary memory. This is the primary memory for these devices, just like the computer's RAM. Just like the computer's RAM. So it's used to store the system running information and parameters, meaning that, for example, when you start up your device, then the system software is going to be loaded from the flash drive to the SDRAM. Also, the configuration file is going to be loaded from the flash drive to the SDRAM. So I hope that is clear. Now, with the NVRAM, it's called NV because it's non-volatile. Non-volatile, as I've said earlier, means it cannot lose. It cannot lose the content when there's no power. What I didn't mention about SDRAM is that SDRAM is volatile, meaning that it will lose content in case power goes out. Now, with the NVRAM, it is used to store the log buffer files. The log buffer files, sorry. Someone has a question? Okay, just mute your mic when you have nothing to talk about. So the log buffer files. Now, the log buffer files. What does that mean? What does that mean really? Now, normally the CPU requires to access files quite fast and also write files quite fast. So for that, the CPU does not write directly to the flash drive when it wants to store things here. What the CPU does is that it writes to the NVRAM because the NVRAM is a faster storage media compared to the flash. Then, so the NVRAM acts as the buffer. Buffer means that we're able to write things here very fast, then they can be written at a slower speed to the flash drive, like that. So normally we write like that. In order for us to write from the buffer to the flash, for example, there's a timer that is going to expire, or whenever the buffer is full, we also write whatever is in the NVRAM now to the flash. So that's the purpose of the NVRAM. Now, just like in your laptops, you might also have other slots, like we have the slot for an SD card. Sorry. We have a slot for an SD card. So this is used to provide an external storage. So if you have a memory card, then you can be able to install it in your switch or router in order to increase the storage capacity of your permanent storage. Similarly, you can also use a USB, a flash drive, to do that. So most of the time, we also use either the SD card or USB, for example, to transfer files or to backup files from the device. So those are the commonly used storage media in Huawei data communication equipment. Okay, so the device initialization process simply means that we are now starting up the device. So how does it work? After the device is powered on, it runs what you call the boot read-only memory software in order to initialize the hardware and to display the hardware parameters. So really, most of us have heard of the BIOS, and therefore the boot ROM software is the one that is loaded from the BIOS in order to start that particular device. So when you're starting the device, it also runs the system software. It runs the system software, then it reads the configuration file from the default storage path in order to perform initialization. So some of the things that you might see when you're starting up the device, for example, is the location where you are, the storage location where the VRP is being loaded to, and of course the name of the file and the extension. You can see it ends with .cc. You can see it ends with .cc, meaning that it is a system file. So this is just the name, and it has several meanings where we have VRC, SPC, so they have several meanings there. But this is just the name and the extension of the VRP file that is being loaded from the flash storage media. Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, so anyone with a question, by the way? Anyone with a question? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, for device management simply means for you to interact with the device, operating systems will normally offer you what we call a user interface, a UI. The user interface might be graphical user interface, or it can be character user interface. So it can be a GUI or a CUI. Graphical user interface means you are clicking, you're using most of the time a mouse and a keyboard to click on certain icons in order to perform certain operations on your computer. So that is what we call a graphical user interface, like what you're using right now. You're able to see things. Otherwise, the other option is the character user interface. With a character user interface, you type in textual commands to what we call a command prompt or a command line interface. So with Huawei devices, it offers two types of user interfaces. One of them is graphical, that is a web system, meaning that you're using your browser. You can simply connect using HTTP or HTTPS and be able to manage your device. The problem or the downside to accessing through the web system is that the web system can only be used to manage and maintain only a few, but not all device functions. So that's one of the limitations of the web system. Otherwise, the other one is the command line interface, CLI, the command line interface. Command line interface. So the command line interface is a character user interface, and it will enable you to enter commands. It will enable you to enter commands using text, and you can be able now to configure the device fully. So as a network engineer, you're expected to be familiar with these commands. So normally, we connect to the device either using a console port or using telnet or using a SSH login in order to be able to access the command line interface. Mostly during our labs, we're going to be using the CLI to manage and configure devices. So you'll need to be able to remember at least some of the commands that we learn during the training. Now, the VRP user interface. So as we've said, when you log in into the device through a command line supported mode, the system will allocate you a user interface to manage and monitor that particular session. To manage and monitor that particular session. So generally, the user interface that you get can either be achieved through what we call a console user interface. So the console user interface means you've connected to that particular device using what we call a console cable. We are going to see that just now. So normally you connect through a serial port in order to get a console user interface. The other type of interface that you can get is what we call the virtual type terminal, commonly referred to as VTY. So VTY interface is used to manage and monitor users who log into a device by means of VTY. So if you access the device through telnet or through a secure telnet or SSH, for example, then the interface that you're going to get really is what we call VTY, or virtual type terminal. Now, you can only get one. You can only get one console user interface, while for the virtual user interface, you can get a maximum of 15 user interfaces. What that means simply is only a single person can be able to log in through the console user interface at a time. But with a virtual type terminal, we can have a maximum of 15 people telnetting into the same device. So that is what we mean when we say you can get a maximum of 15 VTY user interface, but just a single console user interface. So I hope that is clear. Now, in order to manage the security of your device and limit users' access permission to your device, then Huawei provides what we call user levels and command levels. And normally they are mapped. By mapped meaning, for example, if you are user level 0, you can only be able to access command level 0. If you're user level 1, you can be able to access command level 0 and 1, and so on and so forth. So what is important to note here is that the user levels move from level 0 to level 15. But the user levels, again, from level 3 to level 15, they are the same. They're the same user level. Only that now, for example, you cannot be able to remove or create a user with a higher level than yours. So that's the main difference. That's the main difference between this user level 3 to 15. So it's the same level, but the only difference is that you cannot create a person with a higher level than yours. If we've created you with level 3, you cannot create a person, an account whose level is 4. And you cannot also remove a person whose user level is 4. So that is what that means. Now let's look at the command level. Command level, it begins from 0 and goes to 3. 0 to 3. So command level 0 means it is a visit level, meaning that you cannot be able to do any kind of configuration. You can just be able to use simple commands such as ping, transat, in order to test connectivity and how data is moving. And you can also be able to use a few display commands at the visit level. Then command level 1, you can only be able now to monitor. It's called the monitoring level, meaning you can be able to display, use the display command, more display commands in order to see the configuration of certain protocols or interfaces. So really, that is the monitoring level. So then we have command level 2, which is called the configuration level. So configuration level simply means that you can now be able to configure routing protocols, IP configuration commands, and provide users with network services. Then the last one, of course, is the management level, meaning you can now be able to do everything, including creating users, assigning them to certain services like FTP, TFTP, Telnet, user management. You can be able to change their command levels or user levels. Okay, I think someone's mic is on. Rio, please watch your mic. This is the second time you're interrupting us. Okay, so it is important that you understand these user levels and command levels because as a network administrator, you don't want, for example, to give an intern a user level of 2, for example. You just want to teach them slowly by slowly. So you might have to start them at a user level of 0 and maybe command level 0 so that they can just help you to do simple monitoring, but they can be able to configure and change your device configurations. Okay, so how to log into the web system? For example, if the address of your router is 192.168.1.1, then you simply start your browser, and on the address bar you enter that, then you press enter. So once you do that, you're going to get a web login page where you can be able now to enter your username and your password, then you log in. So it's that simple. It is that simple to connect to via web system. Just remember that when you connect using the web system, there are some configurations that you cannot be able to do. But now, for you to be able to fully configure your device, you might need to connect it or access it via the command line interface. So when you're accessing it, like the way is shown here, it's referred to as a local login. So we have local login, and we also have remote login. So local login normally is when you are accessing the device when through connecting it with a cable like the console cable, or when you are accessing it from your internal network using telnet. So that is local login. Otherwise, remote login is when you are accessing it over the internet. So that is what we call remote mode or login. So I hope you get the difference between those two. Now, for example, this is what we call a console cable. This is a console cable. A console cable really, so the name is console cable. A console cable is a serial cable that is used to connect your device to your computer. Normally, we do this during the initial configuration. We've just received this device from the procurement office, and now we want to configure it for the very first time. Normally, we do that through the console cable. Now, one end of the console cable is simply an RJ45 port. So you can see that this one is simply an RJ45 interface, or yeah. So normally your router or switch will provide a particular interface with labeled, it must be labeled console port that now can be used for the initial configuration. So that's where you connect that. Then on your computer, you might have a serial port called a COM port where you'll be able now to connect this. So it is always important, for example, that when you're going to purchase the computer that your network engineer is going to use to monitor and configure the network, you look whether it has this serial port. And normally this device is called, is it network management? I'm forgetting. There's a name for this device that is used to monitor and configure the network devices, but I'm forgetting. But just remember that whenever you go purchasing a PC, most laptops don't come with they don't come with a COM port, but luckily we have what we call a USB or COM to USB converter. So when we meet on Saturday, I'll try and come with a console cable and also with a COM to USB converter so that you can be able to see them. So if your laptop does not offer the port, you can purchase this particular converter so that you can be able to use it for that. So after connecting your device to with a console cable, you need a software. No, this PuTTY. I told you about PuTTY the other day. We have a software called PuTTY that you now use to get the command line interface. So PuTTY can be used to log in either through Telnet, through SSH, or through a serial interface like the console cable, or through a serial interface like the serial cable that we've just seen there. Now, when you're doing a local login, it means that the terminal, that is your device that you're using to configure the device, is connected to the Huawei device using a console port. Now, when you do that, there are several settings that you have to specify on PuTTY. So this is the software called PuTTY. Now, one of the things you have to specify is the port that you've connected to. So for example, that serial port is COM1. The other thing you have to set is the speed. Normally by default it's 9600, just don't change it. Then you have to specify the connection type. So the connection type can be Telnet, SSH. This time we are using our console cable, so we have to choose a serial. So please remember this. You might get a question to do with these parameters in your exam. So that's how you do it. So you can also use PuTTY for remote login. So we can also use PuTTY for remote login. Remote login means that you log in into your device that can function as a remote login server. As a remote login server. Now, the console port is automatically enabled in your device. But for you to be able, for example, to access your device through remote login, you have to enable that particular feature because by default it is disabled. So you can't log in through SSH in your device unless you've enabled it in your device. So always remember that you have to enable it for it to function. Now, if you want to do that on PuTTY, you have to first of all do this. You have to check there. So the connection type is SSH. Then it will ask you for the IP address of your device and the port via which you want to communicate to. So normally the default port is port 23 for Telnet and port 22 for SSH. So I hope that is clear. So let's look at the CLI. So CLI in full, CLI is command line interface. Command line interface, common tool for engineers to interact with network devices. So really, after you've entered those configurations on PuTTY, when you click on open, let me just go to the previous one. So when you click here on open, then the next thing you get is the CLI. This is what you get. You get the CLI. You can see really that the CLI is provided by PuTTY. So when you see this, you just know that I'm inside the device. I can be able to configure it now. So let's move on and see how that is done. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the command line commands and configuration. So we begin by looking at the structure of the commands. So CLI command follows a unified structure. Unified structure means it's the same structure across all devices. So after a command is entered on the CLI passes the command and executes it to implement the function of the command, such as query, configuration, or management. Now, this is the syntax. This is the syntax of Huawei command. So this is the command structure. So the command structure begins with a command word. After the command word, you can only have one command word. After the command word, then you have the keyword. So keyword is a special character string that is used to further restrict that particular command, where the command word specifies the operation that you want to execute. For example, display or reboot, like that. Now, after the keyword, then you have parameter list. The parameter list must have a parameter name and a parameter value. Now let's look at an example. So we have an example like display. Then we have so let me just do a single space. Display, then IP, then interface, then GE 0/0, stroke 0, like that. So here display is the command word that is used to view the content of a particular configuration. Then the next bit is the keyword IP. Then the parameter name, we want to look at the interface. Then the parameter value, the number of that particular interface, gigabit Ethernet 0/0/0. So that is how the commands are structured. And it's important that you remember this, that you have a command word, just a single one. You can have one or more keywords, and you can have one or more parameters. So that is the example that is being given here. And here we also have a command that is used to restart the device. It's reboot. So this particular one just have a single command word. It does not have any keyword. It does not have a parameter list. Just you write reboot, enter, and it's going to be executed. So that's how it looks like. Okay, so just a moment. Give me just a minute. Okay, so let's look at what we call command views. Command views are very important. A device provides various configuration and query commands. To facilitate use of these commands, VRP registers the commands in different views according to their functions. Now, generally, we have three, you can think of it as three levels of views. The first level is called the user view. The user view. Then we have the system view. Then after the system view, we have the others. So by level, really, it means that if you are in the user view, by default, when you log in into a device, you start from the user view. So that is what you see, the user view. Now, for you to be able to do any configurations, on the user view, you can only be able to do a few things, like check the running status of the device using the display commands. Now, if you want to do any, if you want to set, that is, do any configuration, if you want to configure your device, you have to move from user view to system view. So we will be talking about this a lot. Move to system view, then enter this command. Now, when you're on the system view, you can now be able to, for example, configure your interface. For example, that command that we just looked at. So you can be able to configure your interface. So that is called an interface view. Or you can be able to configure a protocol. So that is called a protocol view. Like you're configuring OSPF, ISIS, BGP. Then so when you get into OSPF, then that is called an OSPF area view, for example. So these are just examples, but most importantly, please remember that when you log into the device, you start from the user view, but you have to move from the user view to the system view in order to be able to configure any commands and be able to get into either the interface view, protocol view, or the other views. So you might have other views. That's why we have that. Let me just show you in the next slide. So this is it. View name. Okay, so whatever is in this is the view name. Whatever is in that colored and whatever is in this is the view prompt. Prompt, this is what we're calling a prompt. So when the CLI begins, it gives you a prompt. So when you're in the user view, the prompt is like this. You have this angle brackets, then whatever is inside the angle brackets is the name of the device. Now, to move from user view to system view, you use the command system view. You see here, you type the command system-view. So when you type that and press enter, it's gonna move you to the system view. How you know that you're in user view? The device name is now enclosed in square brackets and not the angle brackets as before. So you can see here, we are really on system view. We are on system view. Now, for example, if we want to configure an interface and maybe assign it an IP address, then we have to type this command: interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0/1. So this command will now move us from the system view to the interface view. We can know that it's an interface view because now, other than the device name, we have the interface name and number. Gigabit Ethernet 0/0/1. So that is what you're having here. That is what you're having here. And this command here is used to configure the IP address. So IP address, then the address 192.168.1.1, then space, then the mask. So we're going to talk about mask and that later. So please remember that the command name, the keyword, so IP here is the command name, the keyword is address, the parameter is the IP address and the mask. All of them are separated using a space. So IP space, address space, 192.168.1.1 space 24. So they're separated using spaces. Now, in order for you to go back from one view to another view, the command that is used to do that is quit. So if we are on the interface view and we want to go back to system view, we type the command quit. So it will take us back to the system view. If we want to get to protocol view, we can type, for example, the command OSPF1, then, for example, area 0, and it's going to take us into the area view. You can see that that is the area view. Now, if you want to move all the way from, for example, a protocol view to the user view, you can type the command return. So return is the command that is used to return you to the user view directly. So instead of quitting, because if you're here, if you're on the area view, you'll have to quit at least 3 times for you to get to the user view. But if you want to go to the user view very fast, you can just use the keyword or the command word return. So I hope that is clear. Any question or comment? Question or comment here? Okay. So let's see how you you edit how you edit a command. How you edit a command. So editing a command really is just the same way you edit a text document. So for example, the backspace is used to delete the character before the cursor and move the cursor to the left, just like in Word. Then you can use the left cursor key, this one, the left arrow. Normally I call it on the keyboard, the left arrow. Or you can use the keyboard shortcut, Control+B, to move the cursor 1 character to the left. To move the, so what that means is that you have interface like that. You've typed that. So if you want to take the cursor to the left, you can use Control+B, or you use the left arrow on your keyboard. The right arrow does the opposite thing, or you can also use Control+F. So you can use the right cursor on your keyboard or Control+F to move the cursor to the right. Let's look at something to do with the incomplete. Sorry, let me just stop your video, Timothy. Incomplete keyword. So your device allows you to use incomplete words. Now, if an entered character string can match a unique word, then you do not need to enter the remaining characters of the keyword. You do not need to enter the remaining characters of the keyword. Let me give you a good example. That particular command to get into an interface in full might be written as interface gigabit Ethernet, then space, then 0/0/1, for example. But we can write it in short, for example, as int, because there is no other keyword that starts with int, int. Then we can just type G, for example, or GE. I think it's just G, like that. Then we type the number of the interface, like that. So we can shorten commands by writing the short form like that. So that's just an example. Let's look at this one that has been given here. So for example, we have a command called display current configuration that is used to display whatever has just been configured on the device. So you can type let me see, is identified when you enter. Oh, display current configuration. You can type either of these short forms, DCU or DICU or DISCU. However, the command cannot be identified if you enter D and C or Ds and C, because the character string DC or matches more than one command. So you'll see that sometimes when you use these short forms, you might get an error message. that error message normally has a pointer telling you where the error exactly is. So for example, this error message is saying ambiguous command found at this particular position. So we've entered D space and C. So when it says ambiguous command, it means that you might have another command that matches this particular short form. You have more than one command that starts with a D, then C. So that is what that means. But these three will work. These three will work. Okay. Now, the other very important feature for the command line interface that you're supposed to know and use regularly is how to use the tab key to autocomplete your commands. So, for example, if you type info hyphen and you press tab on your keyboard, it will autocomplete it to the full command word info center. So for example, if I type int, then I press tab on my keyboard, it is going to autocomplete that to interface because there is no other keyword that starts with int. So that is one way of doing it. Now, if there is another keyword that starts with that particular, if there's another keyword that starts with that particular letter that I've typed, then it's going to repeatedly circulate through those particular commands. What that means is this one. See this example here. We have info center space, then we've entered log. Now, if we press tab once, it's going to autocomplete it to log buffer. If we press tab again, it's going to circulate to the next word that starts with log. If we press tab again, we are going to get to the next word that starts with log. So I hope you understand what that means. Now, if an entered character string cannot identify any keyword, then the entered string remains unchanged after you press tab. So if you enter any incorrect command or keyword and you press tab and that particular keyword does not exist on the system, then it will not change. It will not change or autocomplete it. So that's how you use tab to make your life easier. So it's very important. Using command line, online help. Why do they call it online help? I don't understand. Anyway, we have two, your CLI will provide you with two types of command help. The first one is called full help. The other one is called partial help. So let's first look at the full help. As you know, with character user interface, you cannot always accurately remember the command words and the keywords. So that's why you need help. Now, full help is when you get to a particular view and you just press a question mark, then you press enter on your keyboard. When you do that, a list of all the commands that are possible on that view are going to be displayed, and not just the name of the command, but the name of the command in one column and the function of that particular command. So that is what we call full help. So for example, you can type, for example, interface, then space, then question mark, then enter. So it is going to bring you a list of all the commands that are possible after typing interface. So that is also an example of full help. On the other hand, with partial help, you can remember some bit of the command but not the whole bit. So for example, we are on user view and we type letter D, then question mark, then enter. So it's gonna bring us all the commands that start with a D on user view, all the commands and their description that start with a D on user view. So really, that is the main difference between full help and partial help. Please remember that whenever you're using partial help, we do not have a space between the word and the question mark. Okay, yes, Anthony, you have a question? I can see you've raised your hand. Anthony, go ahead. Yes.
Question. Now the interface, the command that you just said.
Sorry, I can't get you very clearly.
Okay, my question is, are you getting?
Your question is?
Okay, the interface, the command that you just said, interface then question mark.
Oh, I really can't get you. Can you try and be louder?
The question that he's asking. You see the interface effect above full help. There's a space between an interface and a question mark. I believe that's a question that he wanted to clarify.
Now, my question is the interface that you just said, interface then question mark. Is that full help or partial help?
That is full help. That is full help, eh? That is full help. For partial help, it will be interface, then question mark without the space there. So if I press enter, it's going to bring me all the commands that starts with those letters, INTERFACE, okay? Is that okay? Okay, thank you for that question, Anthony. Hey, excuse me, please. Okay, so let's move on. So I really like these notes because at least this time they have included something to do with error messages. This was not there before. Now, if a command passes the syntax check, then the system will execute it. Otherwise, the system will report an error message. So let's look at some of them. Now, sysname is a command to change the name of that particular device. By default, the device, Huawei routers will have the name Huawei, like that, while the switches will have the name Huawei, but in caps. So that's the default name. Now, if we wanted to change this router's name, for example, to R1, then the command is, we have to be on system view, then we type the command sysname, then space, then R1, for example, like that. So that's how we do it. But if we type just sysname and we press enter, let's look at the error message and try to understand it. So you're going to get this. Incomplete command at this position. Are you seeing at this position? So for example, when you get that and you can't remember what is supposed to come next after that command word, then you can go ahead and use complete full help. You just type sysname space question mark. Then it's going to tell you all the commands that are possible after that. Probably it's going to tell you that you're supposed to enter now the name of that particular router. So that's one. The other one is here. We've written the command router if 1.1.1.1. And the error message is unrecognized command found at, meaning here, found here. So meaning it has encountered a command that it does not know. An identification failure occurs at the position pointed by the arrow. So you have to check again whether the command is correct. Maybe you've just mistyped it. So that is what we call the unrecognized command. That keyword is not known. The other one is ambiguous. I think we've already seen this ambiguous command. So for example, you just type the short form A, then press enter. But there are more than one command starting with the keyword A. So really, it will tell you it's an ambiguous command until you enter some other characters. So that's the other one. The other one is wrong parameter. Wrong parameter found at that particular position. So it simply means that the parameter value at the position pointed by the arrow is invalid. So for example, when we are configuring OSPF, you're going to see that we can be able to configure the OSPF cost. So for example, you enter 80,000 and maybe the maximum value that is allowed is 20,000. Just that an example. That is just an example. So if the maximum is 20,000 and you enter 80,000, then it's going to tell you that that is a wrong parameter. Okay. Oh, the other very important one is the undo command. Undo command. Undo is very important because it helps you to go back. It helps you to go back, just like in text, text files. Now, look at how we can use it. One of them, we can run an undo command to restore the default configuration. So here, we are going to system view by typing system view on user view. Then we use the command sysname space, then we give it a new name, server. So the name changes to server. So if we want to remove this name, we can use the undo command. So undo sysname, and the name will go back from server to Huawei. So that's one. The other one, we can use the undo command to disable a function. Now, as you're going to see, some functions have to be enabled because they are disabled by default. So for example, we can enable FTP on this particular router. So FTP server enable is the command. So if we want to disable FTP services on this particular router, we use the undo command like that on system view. Undo FTP server. We can also use the undo command to delete a configuration. One of the configurations that you might need to delete regularly during the labs is the IP address. So for example, you've gone into an interface G0/0/1, then you've typed IP address 192.168.1.1 space the mask 24. So if you realize that, oh, I've configured the wrong IP address, there are two ways you can do it. You can just go ahead and use the same command and type the correct IP address, or you can remove that IP address by using the undo command. So you just type undo IP address, and it's going to delete that IP address. So I hope you've seen the few ways in which you can use the undo command to undo certain configurations. Just like any other operating system, VRP also provides keyboard shortcut keys that can speed up and simplify your command inputs. So we have two categories of keyboard shortcut keys: user-defined and system shortcut keys. So user-defined means you've configured it. So you can configure Control G, for example, Control L, Control O, and Control U. So When you do that, you are associating a user-defined shortcut key with any command. This is just an example. To configure shortcut key, you have to go into the system view. Then the command word is hotkey, and then you say you want to use Control L. So Control_L. Then you want that if someone presses Control L, you want this particular command to be executed, display TCP status. So that is why we call it a user-defined key. Then we have the system shortcut keys. For example, Control A, it will move the cursor to the beginning of the current line. To the beginning of the current line. So sometimes you have int G 0, /0, /1. So you don't want to move your cursor one by one like that. So you realize that, for example, you mistyped this. You mistyped that. So you don't want to move the cursor one by one using the left arrow on your keyboard. So you can press Control A to go all the way to the beginning of that line. Then Control B will now move to the end here. Tap like that. Oh no, Control B will move the cursor one character to the left. One character to the left, this way. Sorry about that. Control C will stop the running of the current configuration. For example, sometimes we do ping, and when we get by default it will send us 5 replies, but when we get 2, we can stop it by pressing Control C. Then Control E moves the cursor to the end of the current line, so the opposite of Control A. So E for end, so it gets to the end, A gets to the beginning. A gets to the beginning, E gets to the end. Okay, so you'll have a look at the others in your own time. And of course, in the exam, expect some questions around that. Okay, so we come back to file system. We just want to see some of the operations that you can be able to do on the file system, some of the commands that are commonly used. So one of the command is pwd. These commands are not very different. For those of you who've learned Linux or even Windows DOS, then you know that these commands are just the same as those that are used in Linux and also in Windows. So one of the commands is pwd, which is used to check the current directory. So it will display the current working directory. That means it will display the location. Current directory simply means it will display the location of that particular prompt. By default, when you start your device, the current working directory is the flash drive. So if you press pwd enter, then you get the flash drive. Then if you want to see the contents of the directory, you type dir. So it will display the contents of the directory and the information about those files in the directory. We're going to see that just now. If you type more, then you open the contents of a text file. So more space, then the name of the file that you want to open. If you want to change the current working directory to another directory, the command is cd. So I think here there was a mistake. They entered A, but the command really is cd for change directory. So cd is used to move from one folder to another folder. Then we have make directory. Again, here we have A somewhere that I think is not supposed to be there. The command is supposed to be make directory. Make directory, mkdir. Sorry, mkdir. So that is the command. Then you enter the name of the folder you want to create. Make directory, then for example backup, then you press enter, so it will create a folder called backup. Okay. RMDIR is used to delete a directory, remove directory in full. RMDIR, then the name of the directory. So for example, RMDIR backup, it's going to delete that one that we just created. Copy is used to copy a file. Move is used to move a file. So you say move, then the location where you want to move the file. Rename is used to rename a file. So rename, then you enter the old name, then the new name. So for example, rename backup to backup 2020, something like that. Then you have delete, then the name of the file you want to delete together with the extension of that particular file. So delete really is used to delete a file. Now, when you delete a file, just like in other operating system, it goes to the what you call the recycle bin. But if you want to delete a file permanently, you use the command unreserved. So for example, delete unreserved, then the name of the file or directory. So when you press enter, then that particular file is going to be deleted permanently. It's not going to be stored. It's not going to be stored on the recycle bin. Otherwise, if you've deleted a file or a directory, you can restore it. You can restore it from the recycle bin by typing the undelete command, then the name of the file, like that. Undelete space backup. So it's gonna retrieve that. When we want to empty the recycle bin, we use the command reset. Reset recycle -bin is used to empty the recycle bin. We've already seen this command that is used to change the name of the device. Sorry. So sysname, then the name. We also have a command for changing the time of the device. The time is important in order to ensure successful coordination with all the other devices in your network, because this time is what is going to be used, for example, to even update log files on the time that particular resources on your network was accessed. So always make sure you do it. These three commands are used to do that. The first one is the time zone, clock time zone, that is used to set the time zone, then date time, that is used to set the date and the time, and also the daylight saving time. So these are the commands that are used for that. During the lab, you're going to explore it further. We can also be able to configure command level. The command to do that, first thing, you have to be on system view to configure command level and command privilege. So you start with the keyword command privilege, then level, and then you give it a value between 0 and 3, then view name and the particular command that you want them to see. You can also be able to configure password-based login mode. So for example, for the virtual type interface, so the command is user interface 0 / 4, meaning we are creating a maximum of 5 interfaces from 0 to 4. So we're going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, meaning if someone else tries to log in after 5 people have logged in through VTY, then they cannot be able to access it. So then we can type the command set authentication password cipher then we can be able to type the password here, the particular password that we want to set. As I said earlier, a device supports a maximum of 15 concurrent VTY-based user accesses. Maximum is 15, but when you do this, we're just creating 0 to 4. We're just creating 5, but you can be able to, for example, say 0 to 14 to 14, so that you have a maximum of 15 that is allowed. Okay, so you can also be able to configure what you call the idle timeout for security. It's very important. So this command sets a timeout period to disconnect from the user interface. So if no command is entered within the specified period, the system will log off that particular person. The default timeout period is 10 minutes. By default, that time is set to 10 minutes. Okay, so configure an IP address for an interface. How to do that, we've already seen. You have to be on system view. We know that we're on system view again because our prompt is square brackets. So the command is interface, then the interface name and the interface number. So again, this is wrong. That syntax there is wrong. So it's supposed to be interface, then interface name, interface name, then interface number. For example, int g 0/0/1. So this is the keyword interface. Then G is the interface name, meaning it's gigabit Ethernet. Then the number of the interface, because my router has more than 1 gigabit interfaces, so I have to specify. I want to configure 0/0/1. So after that, I'll go into that particular interface view. And I can be able, for example, to configure the IP address using the command IP space address. Then I'll have to enter 2 things here, the IP address and the mask. So after entering the IP address, I have to enter the mask. So the mask can be written in one of 2 ways. Anyway, we're going to talk about that later. I'm going to tell you about that later, so that you understand it better. Let me just allow me not to talk about it right now. Okay, then you have display currently effective configuration. If you want to display the current configuration, the command is display, then current - configuration. Now, after changing, for example, configuring your IP address, like what we've done here, you have to save your work using the save command. The save command works on user view. You can see that we are on user view. You type save and then enter. It's going to ask you, do you really want to do this, blah, blah, blah. You type Y and then enter again. So when you save, then you can be able to check the saved configuration here. And when you restart your device, that configuration will not be lost. So always make sure that you save. After doing a lab, make sure you save using the save command, so that next time you open that topology, you can be able to continue with the configurations that you made. So don't forget that. Otherwise, if you want to return to the default configurations, that is, you delete the saved configuration using the command reset saved - configuration. Then you can use the command display startup to check the system startup configuration parameters. So it's going to show you the configuration that is currently running and the one that will be used for the next startup, and other information like license file. We're going to see that in the case file, the configuration file, the system software, the patch file, as well as any voice file that might be there. So we are going to see that just now. Configure the configuration file for the next startup. Sometime we might want to use a different configuration file when we restart the device. So the command is startup saved configuration. Then you give it the name and the location of the file that you want to be used during the next startup. Then if you want to restart a device, for example, you've specified the configuration file that you want it to run in the next startup. So you can force the startup by rebooting your device using the command reboot. Okay, so let's look at a case. So we are just about to wind up. So let's look at this particular case. So the requirements description, we want to check information about files and directories in the current directory of a router named RTA. So and then we are supposed to create a directory named test, then we delete it. So that is what we want. So this is the router. It's named RTA, they say, but from here you can really see that the name is still Huawei and not RTA. So I don't know why they said that. Anyway, we can use the command pwd to see the current working directory. So if you type pwd and then we press enter, we can see that we are on the flash. We are on the flash drive. I told you that this is the hard drive of that particular device. Then we can use the command dir to see the contents of the flash drive. So you see when you type dir, it tells us directory of flash. Then we can see a number of things here. So this is the ID of each of the content. Then this is the attributes. These attributes are very important. I'm going to talk about it just now. Then this is the size. This is the file, the size of the file or the directory. Then this is the time. The time when that particular file was created or edited. Then this is the file name and the extension or the directory. Okay, let me just go through these parameters. We can see D, we can see R, we can see W, and we might also have E. So where we have a D, it means that that is a directory. Directory. R is for write. R is for read, sorry. For read writes, read writes. It means you can be able to read that particular directory or file. W is for write, writes, meaning you can be able to write that particular file. Normally E is for execute. Or for example, if it's an application, you can be able to execute it. So E is for execute. So please remember that. Remember that. So we can see, for example, here, we can see here that our very first file here is a directory because it has a D. It has D for directory. So the other way you know that you're dealing with a directory, directories don't have an extension, while files will have an extension like .zip. So files have an extension, directories don't have an extension. Okay, so our task was to create a directory named test. So we do that using the command mkdir. Just a moment. Okay, so mkdir is the command for creating a directory, and then we are naming it test. So after doing that, if we type the command dir, we should be able to see our directory called test. It's here. Now, the other part was to delete it. So to delete, we use remove directory, rmdir, then the name of that particular directory. So that is going to delete it. So let's look at the next. So now we want to rename this file called huawei.txt. We want to rename it to save.zip. Then we also want to copy this particular file. And as we copy it, we name it file.txt. So let's do it. So we had huawei.txt. Let me just show you in the previous here. Where is it? Oh, we didn't have it. Oh, we didn't have it in this example. I thought we had it. Anyway, okay. So the command is rename. Then the name of the file you want to change and the extension, and also the name, the new name and the extension that you want to give it. So when we type dir, we should be able to find save.zip. You can see it there. Okay, to copy a file, you simply use the copy command, copy, then save.zip, then the new name and extension, file.zip. So if we do dir, we can be able to see file.zip here. So that's how we copy. Okay, let's do the next operation. So here we want to move. We move the file to the DHCP directory. So to do that, the command is move, then the name of the file, then the location where we want to take it. We want to take it to flash DHCP, like that. So cd is a command that is used to change the directory or to move from one directory to another. So here we are moving from the flash directory to DHCP, which is in the flash flash drive. So cd DHCP. Then once we are there, we can type dir to confirm whether this file was moved there. And indeed, we can see that inside the DHCP directory, we now have file.txt. These commands and file operations are very important because sometimes you might actually configure files. You might configure files on a simulation software, then upload them to your device. So it's important that you know how to move them to the correct location. To delete, the next one is we need to delete the file. So the command is delete, then the file name and the extension. So if we do dir now in the folder DHCP, we can't find file.txt. To undelete, we know what undeleting is to restore the deleted file. So if we undelete, we can see that it comes back. Okay. So this is the last case, VRP basic configuration commands. In this particular example, we have connected a PC to a router. So we want to assign the IP address as shown. So we configure this interface G001 with this IP address. Then we want to allow other employees of the company to use the password Huawei123 to remotely log into the router through the PC. So for that, we have to create a VTY interface. So allow them to view configurations. Then we want to allow them to view configurations but disable them from modifying configurations. So that just means that we have to manage their user level to maybe a maximum of 1. Then we are supposed to save the current configuration, and we name the configuration file Huawei.zip. Then we configure that particular file to be used during the next startup. We configure this configuration file to be used for the next startup. So those are some of the things that you're supposed to do here. So let's just quickly see how to do them. So configure an IP address. We've already seen how to do this. Just as a reminder, you have to go to System View. And then here we're just renaming our device to AR1. Then we go into the interface by typing that command. Then we type the IP address and the mask. Then we can configure user level and user authentication mode. So we create VTY interfaces to allow remote login. So the command is user-interface VTY 0-4. 0-4. Now, it is important that I mention here, if you create user interface VTY 0, you just 0 alone, then no one can be able to remotely log in into your device. No one can be able to remotely log in into your device. So it's important that you remember that. Expect a question around that in the exam. Now, authentication mode we can choose authentication mode password. The command is authentication-mode space password. So once we do that, and then we press enter, it's going to give us a chance to type the password that we want. In this case, we're just setting Huawei 123. Then after that, on this VTY view, we create the user privilege level. So user privilege level 1. We don't want to give them 0. We want to give them 1 so that they can be able to view the configuration commands, but they can't be able to change anything. Of course, you know that quit will get us away from this VTY interface to the system view. As you're going to see, password configuration command may vary according to different devices. In others, in fact, you just write authentication-mode password, then you type Huawei 123. In others, you have to press enter first in order to be given a chance to enter the password after typing that command. So always look at the product documentation to get the details on how to configure your device. Okay, so let's look at how we can specify the configuration file for the next startup. So we've already configured the name, the IP address, and we've created VTY interface, user level, and password. So we use the save command. This time we don't just write save and we type enter. We type save, then we give it a file name, meaning that we want to save the configuration file in a file called Huawei.zip. So it's gonna ask us, hey, do you really want to save this? Type Y or N for no. So you just type Y, then you press enter. Okay, then you use the command startup save configuration. Startup saved -configuration, then the name of that particular file that we've saved the configuration in. So when you do this, then this is the file that is going to be used during the next startup. This is the configuration file that is going to be used if you restart that particular router. Oh, actually, this is a switch. I'm sorry. This is a switch because you can see that the default name here is all caps. So by default, configurations are saved in the VRP-CFG.cfg file. It's important that you remember here. So when you just type save command, save then enter, it's being saved on this file. But here we saved it on a different. You can also create a file for saving the configurations like what we just did. So make sure that you know the difference. So how to check the configuration that is going to be run during the next startup? You use the command display space startup. So here, there are a few things that you can see here. For example, the system software that is being used, or the one that will be used in the next startup. You can also see the configuration file that is being run right now. So we can see that it is vrp.cfg. This is the one that is running the device right now. But we can see that on the next startup, it is going to run this one, this file that we just created and configured to run in the next startup using that command. Okay. Let me just display the whole of this. Okay, so normally all these commands are saved in a database. So let's just begin with VRP version 5. It has a running configuration database and it has a startup configuration database. So if you want to display the contents of the running configuration database, you type display current configuration. So normally at the end of every lab, you'll be using this command in order to display everything that you've configured, every parameter that you've configured on the device. They're just saying that after configuration, commands are committed, they are saved in the running configuration database. So when you type, for example, interface IP address 192.168.1.1 space 24, enter. So that is what we call committing when you press enter. So they will be saved in the running configuration database. The running configuration database. Otherwise, we also have the startup configuration database. You can look at it by using the command display startup. We just looked at it. So when you save, when you use the save command, and then the command configuration are stored in the startup configuration database. So when we save, then it is stored in the startup configuration database. Now, on the other hand, VRP version 8 has another database that is not there in VRP version 5, which is called the candidates. Candidate configuration database. Candidate configuration database. So this one, if you type the command display configuration candidate, it will display the commands that have been configured. They have been configured, but have not been committed. So if a series of configurations are completed but not committed, the command configurations are stored in the configuration databases. So I hope you remember these three databases: running configuration database, startup configuration, and candidate configuration database. So ladies and gentlemen, that is really the end. That is really the end of this particular chapter. Can a volunteer pick any of the questions and help us answer it as we wind up? Anyone can pick any question they feel comfortable?
I can try on question 1.
Yes, please.
Though I'm not sure. The first question is asking what is the VRP version currently used by Huawei datacom devices? I would say VRP 5 and 8.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Jackson. Just 5 and 8. Otherwise, 1, 2, and 3 have been so far discontinued. Anyone else?
Number 2. What is the maximum number of users that are allowed to log in into your Huawei device through a console port concurrently? Is it 1?
Yes, just a single person.
Yeah,
just a single
but
person.
for the other one, yeah, sure.
For VTY, it is. For VTY, maximum of
Maximum of 15.
15, okay. How do I specify the configuration file for the next startup if a device has multiple configuration files? So we've just seen that command. Startup next configuration. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your participation. After this, we will now do our very first lab. So thank you very much. Asanteni sana sana sana.